Welcome. My name is Sabrina Monarch, and I'm going to be sharing with you some things about the Cancer-Capricorn nodal axis, as well as the 4th and 10th house. We will be considering them synonymous for the purposes of today. It could be either Cancer-Capricorn or 4th and 10th houses, and what it looks like when these nodes are squared. And I'll get into that in just a moment here. And just to introduce myself, I write weekly forecasts at monarchastrology.com, as well as sometimes on YouTube, most weeks. I create video versions of the forecasts. And I also have a podcast, Magic of the Spheres, and I've linked my social medias right here. So I would love to be connected with you and to have you join my community if you have not already been acquainted with me. So I've been doing this series here about the nodes because this is something that I have really cared about in my practice since I began practicing and studying evolutionary astrology, and especially the dynamic of squared nodes. So when there's a planet squaring the nodes. And in this series, I'm exploring what that means about the nodal axis itself, not the planet squaring the nodes. The planet squaring the nodes is going to be an impasse. So we could say, like, let's say there's a planet theoretically here at a 90-degree angle to the nodes. What it means is that there's some quality of that planet squaring the nodes that has not been integrated into the nodal axis. So what is the nodal axis? It's our basic personality and ego structures and life circumstances that result out of our personality. So our personality creates our personal reality. If we change our personality or experiment with trying new things like moving into our north node, we change our karma, we change the events in our lives. But a planet squaring the nodes means that there's been some flipping back and forth between the nodes. So traditionally, when we're talking about the nodes with astrology, the south node represents the karmic past, the north node represents the karmic future, and it's like an A to B storyline. But when you have a planet square the nodes, there's been a sense of vacillating between extremes, or like a seesaw pattern between the nodes. And that has really fascinated me. Like, what do these nodal axes look like when they have been moving back and forth between extremes? So to do this exploration of this on this axis today, and I recommend going back and watching the whole series, and we'll be going through all the signs, all the axes. Just lost my train of thought, but what I want to say is that I'm really, I work off of Jen Spiller's book, Astrology for the Soul. This book has been a huge advancement in my astrology practice since I found it years ago. It kind of like is the key that has opened up a deeper understanding of the nodes for me. And then after I read this book and started to, talk with people, and I've seen a lot of charts since then, I've picked up my own correlations. So what I'm going to be doing in this presentation is sharing the node dynamics from a traditional like A to B standpoint: Cancer South Node, Capricorn North Node, and the reversal Capricorn South Node, Cancer North Node, and describe what those are like. This is largely built off of Jen Spiller's work. So I just want to really put that out there, that that's where I have been inspired, and I've reviewed the book and taken notes and whatnot for this part of the presentation. When I get to the part about the nodes when they're squared, that's more, I would say, original content on my end of contemplating what it means for these nodes to be squared. So I just want to give credit where credit is due. And I warn you, I have so much information that I'm going to go fast. So feel free to rewatch this if you need to, or if you're watching it later, to pause it and read the text and whatnot. But I'm going to just get straight into it because I have a lot to say. So starting with Cancer South Node, or South Node in the 4th house, Capricorn North Node, or North Node in the 10th house. From this point on, I will pretty much just refer to Cancer and Capricorn, but remember that we're also talking about the 4th and the 10th house. So this image, I do sense a little bit of Cancer and Capricorn in it, because she seems so kind of like proper and societal and whatnot, but I feel like the the home kind of like housewife dynamic, and that kind of binary of like the one who takes care of the home and the one who's out in the world is something we can really think about with Cancer-Capricorn. Another thing, this talk might feel like a little bit of a roast. It goes deep. I feel like reading Jen Spiller's books and getting, or her book, and getting an idea of these nodal placements, it feels like you're getting yourself handed to you. So Cancer South Node, I will start out with the positive before we get into this roast. But basically, Cancer South Node people have been taken care of in prior lives by their family unit. So there can be a very precious quality to these individuals that they've had the support of family for a series of lifetimes that have allowed them to develop their subjectivity. So they may have some talents or some sense of, like they've been nurtured. And when people are nurtured, they can accomplish a lot. It's like with children who have good circumstances or good opportunities, it's like we all have so much potential, and the quality of our environment will really determine a lot of what that potential is. So someone with Cancer South Node has definitely had the advantage. Not all the times, there can be mitigating factors, but often they've had the advantage of being taken care of. But in this lifetime, it's kind of like it starts to get into more dependence themes. Like they really are so used to being taken care of that they will kind of project Capricorn qualities onto others. Like, you take care of the structure, you make the money, you go out in the world, like I'll just be whimsical and you can take care of me. And they may have little experience out in the world. They've been protected by the family, and so they've been sheltered. And there can be an unconscious tendency with Cancer South Node to manipulate others through their emotional outbursts. It's kind of like the way that they may know how to get what they need. When an infant needs something, they cry. And this is a very primordial part of the human condition. And I'm going to get to that later too, in terms of this what's called like infantile signaling. So if we appear helpless, people will come and help. And so if this person who has Cancer South Node has been taken care of for many lifetimes, this is an easy resting default of like, I can't handle this right now, I'm going to cry and someone can take care of me. It's not always that literal, but there is that sense of feeling like if I'm just emotional enough, everything will work out. And there's little boundary. If Capricorn's what we're working toward in the North Node here, there's not much development of boundary. And so part of this is learning self-respect and inner authority in this life. And not that being emotional doesn't mean that one doesn't have self-respect, but feeling messy and chaotic and not being able to verbalize how you're feeling, or throwing tantrums and whatnot, like, can be problematic. And they may also be set up in this life to have some difficult family karma. A lot of people with Cancer South Node, I see either like one of two things, like if we're going to be really basic about it: beautiful family circumstance, feel so taken care of, they're good, or they come into this life with like a really difficult family, and the Cancer South Node person is so used to getting their needs met through the family that because they locate the family as their source of their security, the South Node and Pluto, relates to some of our security patterns, they will take on their family members as projects. So as long as their family feels good, they feel okay. So if they incarnate into a family where some of their family members have some severe issues or emotional issues, it's like a never-ending source of frustration for the Cancer South Node person, because they can't fix or manage their family members. And this is to help launch them out of the nest, essentially, like go find meaning out in the world instead of trying to edit or moderate or manage your family. And the issue with this kind of helping is that there's an ego attachment to it, of needing to make other people feel a certain way or feel better so that this individual can feel better. It's not coming from a place of empowerment. It's a dependent, kind of like needy thing to do, but it's masked as help. So there's a deep confusion often for this individual of, why won't people accept my help? That kind of thing. And Jan Spiller uses the words here that when Cancer South Node does this, there's an unpleasant emotional intensity that comes along with their help. And the basic resolution for this is to detach from seeing their family as their primary source of security or meaning in life, and getting out in the world. Capricorn's a worldly energy, and finding having some goals and accomplishing things and developing this sense of can-do-itness, or that they've been able to accomplish something, and it helps them find some meaning and purpose in their own world instead of staying in that nest perpetually. So they have some issues often with lack of emotional boundary. They feel other people's emotions to an extreme. They're naturally empathic. And I think that we're all empathic. I don't think that people are particularly like an empath, but it's kind of like a gradient of how far we go into it. And part of, empathy, there's a porousness that comes with that. And the more boundaried, or if we can be intentional about our boundaries, we don't have to pick up and feel everything all of the time. But often Cancer South Node people have not built that hardening around themselves, so they feel everything. And this can create feelings of victimization. They don't feel in control, and they're easily influenced. And they can relate to this by just not going out, staying home, or feeling like, oh, I don't want to talk to that person because it's going to bring me down. So they just kind of avoid the situation, whereas they could learn how to be responsible for their own feelings, or to create a certain sufficient psychic boundary so that they don't take things on. And they can be over emotional. I just, just to be transparent, I have Cancer South Node. I have these nodes squared, and the advice about feeling your feelings doesn't hit the right chord for me, because earlier in my life, feeling things like, and not having boundary to it would lead to mental health crises for me. There's no boundary to it. It's like you'll just go under and go under. At this point in my life, having more tools with personal development, there I can go into my feelings in a kind of ceremonial way, or feel things through. But for me, sitting in my feelings and just feeling them is pretty much the opposite of what I need a lot of the time. So there's a sense here with Cancer South Node of like, you can get so emotionally flooded that you feel incapable. And then this pattern loops with dependency issues, of feeling like they can't handle life, and then delegating the responsibility to others. And if the environment continues to support that, it's like, oh, they're having a thing, we'll take care of them. And it's part of their reality matrix. Nostalgia can also be an issue for Cancer South Node people. There's a sense of like luxuriating in the past, like certain moments that really felt like home, or where the Cancer South Node person really felt connected, and having a really hard time letting go of it. And this can create, a lot of sadness and longing, and working to be future minded or goal oriented is a really helpful way to kind of pull a Cancer South Node person out of the past and into the more Capricorn side. Capricorn does have a tendency to look back too, but in more of a historical, this is how things have been done kind of way, where Cancer looks back in this like, those were the times where I felt a certain way, and that kind of dreamy nostalgia energy. These individuals are learning responsibility. It's super grounding for them to stick to their word, or to do things like set limits and really mean it. So to not bend all of the time. So they're gaining some boundaries and rigidity from Capricorn, which they don't necessarily have a lot of. If we're looking at Cancer South Node without the Capricorn being part of their past too, in terms of the nodes being squared, we're still just looking at a traditional A to B storyline. This individual can use feelings to avoid responsibility, like not feeling like doing something, and letting that be a reason, like, oh, I don't feel like it. And while being emotionally connected is valuable, because Capricorn South Node will have this opposite problem of constantly delaying gratification and doing hard things all the time. If we don't do things just because we don't feel like it, there can be crises that come out of that. It's not taking responsibility for certain things. So figuring out how to have some grit and take care of things that are hard to do can be very grounding and kind of maturing for this placement. These individuals also need experience. They may have been, sheltered in some way. And so that creates a lack of experience and a lack of confidence. And if they just stay in their shells, because they're like, well, I don't have the experience, I'm not ready, then the problem perpetuates. It's like they're really like, it's a lifetime to be pushed out of the nest and learn things in the world. It helps them to be positive and to have some relationship with productivity. One could use negativity or fear to justify not taking risks. Like, I'll just stay safe because this is dangerous. And they've come up with all their insecure reasons to not do something. However, if we have a goal and we're goal oriented and there's some insecurities, one can, use positivity to talk themselves or kind of give themselves a pep talk into doing a hard thing. And that can be just this very like self-parenting activity for this placement. These individuals have a beautiful subjective inner world they've had time to create, but sometimes this relates to misunderstandings, like they think they know what other people are thinking, and it could help to just tune in and ask. And that's, they might be empathic and really tuned in, but there can be this sense of, needing the feedback. Also, when it comes to conflict resolution, these individuals can be so sensitive. And if they resort to a really immature way of dealing with hurt feelings, like pointing fingers, blaming, exploding in some way, then they may not get the care or the intimacy that they're really desiring. So they're learning how to responsibly approach their feelings with other people in a way that is coming from a place of self-authority. So one of the ways that this can be done is letting people know your intention. Like, hey, this thing came up between us and I want to talk to you about it. My intention is to create closeness between us. It hurt my feelings when this thing happened. But to like really take self-responsibility and not project that onto another and be like, you hurt me, you made me feel this way, and do that whole thing. Dependence is scheduled to end in this life. If you have Capricorn North Node, it's a generalized thing to say, but there's a sense here of wanting to be rescued when they're in a state of loss of control and helplessness. But for the most part, they really don't get rescued. Either no one shows up, or the characters that do show up don't feel good or sufficient to the Cancer South Node person. It's like not what they really need. It's something that's like, oh, this will do, or I don't really want this. Like, it's not the hero or the rescuer energy that they totally want. And this is not to say that a person with Cancer South Node can't receive love and care and help from other people. This is something that they do desire. They do like being taken care of. It's just understanding how to ask for what they need from a place that is more adult, essentially. And if they're in a situation where they can't get any help at all, this can be a signal that this is one of the times where self-reliance or this kind of pulling themselves up Capricorn energy comes into play. And that's, of course, a very difficult experience. So a few more things about Cancer South Node. There can be a tendency to overgive and then to feel drained. And part of the overgiving is a lack of separation or a lack of boundary, and sometimes even a manipulative quality. Like, if I give in this certain way, then this person will be this for me. And so the giving is coming from a place of enmeshment and not necessarily a true kind of attunement to what is needed in this situation. Capricorn can be a cold and dry energy, but compared to an excess of Cancer, there's a certain level of healthy withholding. This can even be like when it comes to relationship and reciprocity, if we're constantly giving to someone and they never give back, and we keep giving thinking that that's how the thing is, the relationship's going to get better, it's not necessarily the right move. Sometimes if there's no reciprocity, it is a time to retreat, and not just to try to keep overgiving. So there can be a way of overgiving and then feeling drained. And so just learning how to pull that back. It also really helps these individuals to focus on integrity, responsibility, self-respect, and working toward meaningful goals. This really helps them pull themselves out of emotional chaos and of being overly enmeshed with their security things with people, and to, find themselves out in the world and feel self-respect from that process. So that is Cancer South Node. And now we'll move to the opposite, which is Capricorn moving to Cancer, or 10th house moving to 4th house. And then after that, we'll talk about what it means to switch back and forth between them. So in short, with Cancer to Capricorn, it's a sense of moving from dependence to testing oneself out in the world and kind of maturation process and learning boundaries. With Capricorn South Node, we're going to have basically a reversal, someone who has come into this life with a lot of boundaries and a sense of, a lot of responsibility and a lot of integrity. And so much so that it's kind of like they're needing the Cancerian waters. These individuals have had past life experience with rigid or highly structured environments or ways of life, where strictly following duty and foregoing pleasures was normal for them. And in having these big goals, or this sense of, honor and a clear kind of ritualistic life, sometimes just like pleasure in life, or kind of the humanness of life, continues to be delayed into the future. And this can be a personal inner process of, delaying gratification, not playing, not indulging in leisure, not resting. But this is also kind of like a social matrix possibility, as in being in a position of prominence and having your personal life or personal desires sacrificed for this bigger public role. And also that there being some kind of personal sense of satisfaction with being honorable and gaining the respect of others, or having this noble kind of public life. And in this life, though, for this individual, the strategy of self-denial in exchange for external respect has diminishing returns and does not work for them in the same way, and can lead to frustration. Because it's where they've derived security in the past in terms of, doing all the right things and getting into places of prominence, they'll kind of try to repeat that again of like, well, if I just sacrifice things and I do things that are noble and I'm, worthy of respect, then I'll get the accolades and the security that I need. But it tends to, in the same way that Cancer South Node wants to be taken care of and wants to be dependent, the environment tends to not reward it, or reward the person in the same way. So there's some openings instead to really discover the Cancerian qualities of tenderness, to cultivate more awareness and presence along the way instead of being strictly goal and ends oriented. So this can relate to presence with others and presence with their own vulnerabilities. So when we delay gratification, we compartmentalize, and sometimes if we're always delaying gratification and we never slow down, then sometimes we can get to the finish line of whatever we wanted to accomplish and still not feel happy, or realize that we don't even want to be there because we were so checked out the whole way. So that's really the risk that comes with, always delaying gratification. And these individuals can be really powerful opportunists when they have a goal. They can see everything as like a path towards that goal. So they do well, like they're very successful naturally. But with the absence of a goal, sometimes their energy can turn toward micromanaging or controlling the people around them, because they have this, if we think about Capricorn like moving mountains, if there's no mountain to move, it becomes micromanaging. And these individuals may have to be careful about their priorities and goals. They have this history of leading stoic and dutiful lives, and they can repeat that at the expense of other values in this life again. So this made me think of the trope of usually a man who is the provider for a family, and he's always working late. He makes a lot of money. The family lives in luxury, but he's disconnected emotionally from his wife and kids. And there's all this resentment towards him because of it. And then he's confused because it's like, but I've sacrificed so much and I work so hard. Why aren't you grateful? And the issue, of course, is providing, being a stand-in for love and connection, which when we're super goal-minded and we don't have that tenderness or the Cancerian side, it's like we can think that the ends are the most important thing and not, how we feel on a day-to-day basis. And so, from these past life experiences of being in charge or having these high pressure public roles, these individuals can be very serious in this life, dutiful, and project this air of not needing anything from anyone. And this can make them pretty unapproachable and keep people at a distance. And this can feel, of course, lonely and isolating for them. And these individuals are just learning how to be more playful and detached from some of their ultra serious outlook. And this can be hard for them because they have been in touch with some grave situations in prior lives, possibly. And they may have like an affinity for it. Like I think of people, like maybe like military people or some people who have done really intense things in their career and they've seen some things and it's hard to go back to normal life, and they know that they, when everything's chaotic and like the world is in crisis, that they can be very severe, buckle down and get, the job that needs to be done. And so it's easy to kind of keep going back to that and keep saying no to, pleasure or living their own life or developing their own inner world, because they have this role in society. But if the role that society is giving them is kind of like drying up, it can be a way to push them into the Cancerian side, just as the Cancer wanting to be taken care of and not getting that can push them into the Capricorn. And these individuals have been very consistent in prior lives with their work ethic or fierce commitment to their goals, but not necessarily consistent in being caring or tuned in emotionally with other people. And this can make them feel kind of uncaring and sometimes even volatile, because they're not emotionally consistent. So it's like you never know when they're going to show emotion and what kind of way it's going to come out when it's been that repressed. So it's a good practice for them to learn how to apply their virtue of consistency to these softer Cancerian things. They're bringing water energy, so connectedness, into their lives and into their work life. So instead of just being so goal-oriented, checking in with how people feel, understanding what's going on in people's lives. And when they tune in with people emotionally, it creates greater cohesion in their lives. And it ends up also creating greater cooperation toward the goals. And some of it might shift a little bit too. Like when we're super goal oriented and we get in this tunnel vision, then we're just going a path, stubbornly, and it really opening up to the water or the heart or the softening might change that path. And that's something that Capricorn might resist. Then this person can have some rigid standards that make it easy for them to cancel or like fire people or just kind of cut people out of their life for disappointing them and not living up to their standards. These individuals might come from very highly structured worlds in prior lives where the code of honor and the code of conduct was more homogenous in their world. So people behaved more with the program. And it's kind of surprising to them in this lifetime to be kind of surrounded by what feels like incompetency, or why can't people be as excellent or as up to these standards. And so they're more likely to just kind of shut the door, kind of cancel people. And at some point, this can create a lot of loneliness and isolation for them. And so they're learning to find some solutions about how to have conversations about how things are going and maybe repair things. But it's a sense of, if they only have experience living in highly structured worlds where things were more black and white, the skill of learning how to be in that emotional gray area of talking things through is something that's very vulnerable for them. I got the image while I was working on this of like all those movie scenes where someone's like washing their face and looking in the mirror and being like, who am I? Like energy. But with a lot of history suppressing their emotions, it can be difficult for these individuals to access that side of themselves. The stuffed emotions are so, it's a loss of control. If it's been stuffed down for that long and it comes out, it's like that image earlier of Alice from Alice in Wonderland, like crying and creating this whole sea of it. But similar to how it helps Cancer South Node to develop responsibility and boundaries, Capricorn South Node to balance out their past life dynamics, when they open up emotionally and unfold there's going to be a lot of power and growth, and a lot of like harmony in their field can come from it too. Another thing that's interesting here is that if you consider someone who's been kind of rigid or has behaved well, or been to code for past lifetimes, passion is something that may be greatly attractive to them, but also scary because it threatens loss of control. And there's a sense, really, with the Cancer Capricorn axis, like it's such a tender axis and there's such a strong desire for security. And so if Capricorn South Node feels all this passion for another person, potentially, it opens up a lot of emotional content in them that they may be scared to go into, or it's a sense of, because they don't enter that space a lot, it feels like too much to be vulnerable and then potentially be abandoned, like it's too much to lose. So it's hard to connect with people healthfully if there's that level of inner turmoil or need to control the situation. So part of what helps this placement, and is also, I think, pretty similar for Cancer South Node, is not sourcing another person as the portal for one's feelings or for one's security, like to really be able to sit with oneself and one's emotions and be responsible about it and then engage. So Capricorn, learning to be a lot more intimate and connected, and that's going to be a challenge for that part of the self that wants to be in strict control. Something that also really helps this placement is emotional disclosure. So revealing how they feel to other people. If you think about someone who's really stoic and doesn't reveal their emotions, usually people just think that they have it together or they can't read them. So it creates a veneer of unapproachability and don't get involved with me. There's no space for you. I have it under control. And so because they have this habit, they might be feeling all sorts of things, but there's like a certain level of, non-readability. So taking the responsibility to let those things out, just as they're letting their emotions out to the surface, but to verbalize how they're feeling and let other people know. And this can create, some people might reflect back a sense of like shame or judgment or not care about this person's feelings, which is not necessarily helpful for an individual who's already repressed their feelings. So finding people in their life that they feel safe with and who care about them can be a great way to kind of, prioritize those relationships and continue to emotionally self-disclose so that intimacy can happen. And for as together as these individuals can be or seem to be, they often don't feel secure. Keeping it together or controlling others is basically a way to chase security. But coming from a place of control tends to not elicit the actual results that one desires, which is security. So whenever we're thinking about like control issues, there's a question of security. And when this individual finds security from within, their inner home or their literal home, so feeling that sense of like coziness and safety, they're less likely to unconsciously try to control others or to control situations and manage them in order to feel secure. They can also really benefit from allowing others to support them. It builds connection in their life if they validate the gifts of others by receiving other people's help, that they don't have to just be the ones in charge all of the time. Okay, so Cancer-Capricorn squared nodes. It's an interesting, one thing that happened, by the way, was I was working on this PowerPoint and I was not able to finish it in time. I had clients today and whatnot, so I had this window to work on it, and I have notes, so I may stop my share to look at the notes so that I don't forget what I was going to share. But essentially, the Cancer-Capricorn squared nodes, you have a dynamic of going back and forth between, and maybe even the ways that I just described, these two nodal axes come from some kind of extreme. Like, what's it like to be in the Cancer extreme? What's it like to be in the Capricorn extreme? From a non-squared standpoint, usually the movement from one node to the other has this level of ease around it to some extent, of like Cancer South node growing up in a supportive enough family, and then moving out into the world and developing their grit and their self-respect. And it's just somewhat gentle. Where Capricorn South node, it's like they move into more emotional cohesion, and there's this natural flow into that direction. When you have the vacillation between Cancer and Capricorn, there's often just a struggle with moderating emotions in time. So often I think with this of kind of emotional outbursts, like being very emotional, right? Then letting it out, it comes out so much that there's a triggered sense of shame about it, and like, let me pull that back in and put it back, or put it in a bottle. So I got this image of Alice in a bottle in, you know, the ocean of tears, saying, oh dear, I wish I hadn't cried so much. So there's a sense of being ashamed of one's outbursts. You know, the Cancer archetype is cardinal water. It's waterfalls, it's bursting into tears. And Capricorn's more dry and wants to like kind of manage things or keep things in boxes. So there's that dynamic of going back and forth between those. Sometimes this placement, when these nodes are squared, can relate to family dynamics where there's not just a sense of being sheltered, which is kind of the Cancer South Node side, but being overprotected, having a restrictive early life experience, a sense of not being able to have developmental experiences that like other kids are having, for example, of like, you know, other kids are allowed to do this thing, but I have to stay home kind of energy. And feeling inadequacy or shame for not developing at like a normal rate, or having this kind of compression in early life. This can relate to exploding later on too. So going away to college and overdosing on something, or, you know, having, you know, drug and alcohol problems, or just like going absolutely wild and like letting it out because there was so much constriction and compression. And it's not just happening from one lifetime, it's perhaps multiple lifetimes of this kind of difficulty balancing Cancer and Capricorn. Another, you know, extreme way that this can manifest is a sense of the environment coming in to control the outburst, which is that, you know, Cancer expression. So this could be jail or like mental institution, like a person being considered too chaotic by their environment that they are punished or they lose privileges. That can also happen in the family dynamic of having to behave in a certain way or else you lose these privileges, which creates this sense of rigidity and fear. And it might, be like a hard touch, like trying to kind of minimize natural childlike behaviors of like, don't do this, but no real reason for it. So it's kind of like an authoritarian environment. Let me see what else I wrote here. So something that comes up too is the consequences of compartmentalizing and then cyclical times of the outbursts occurring. So basically making some kind of sacrifice for too long and then something exploding because of it. And this can be mitigated when someone has these nodes squared. One of the ways that a person can really work with this is unpacking their emotions in time. So being really aware of a tendency to compartmentalize and kind of repress certain things, like why are we doing that? What's the reason for that? And slowing down. And sometimes it can be something like being in a relationship that is, the person's not happy or something, or there's a great cost that comes with the relationship, but doing everything they can to make the relationship work and fit themselves in the box of it. And then accruing what I like to call an emotional credit card, where it's like a debt that you have to yourself for doing things over and over again that didn't feel good or didn't feel right. And then by the time, you have to pay that debt back, it's like you have this backlog of emotional self-betrayal or things like that. So working to unpack emotions in time. Now that I've just gone over like a whole bunch of things that can be difficult about this placement, I do want to offer what can be magical or really like a talent or a gift with these nodes when they're squared. These individuals can be very tuned in with what they're creating and building. So Capricorn is more of our ambition and Cancer can be that intuition or that feeling quality. So when both of these things have been developed, there can be a sense of being very intuitive about business or intuitive about whatever one is building in their life. There's an extra level of like conscientiousness and care and tenderness even towards what one is building. There can also be a really intentional sense of boundary creation or the timing of intimacy. So sometimes like people that are more reserved, and that can be kind of more of the Capricorn side, it takes some time for them to open up or for them to open their heart. But also there can be intelligence in that. If we meet someone and right away we're just like merging souls with them, there's not that much boundary there. Cancer Capricorn nodal squares can relate to people that kind of titrate their level of opening or their level of emotional intimacy. And so they allow time and space to be part of what creates that emotional cohesion or bond. So these people can be very like mature, very self-aware, and very caring for other people in a way that has this level of responsibility to it that really combines the Cancer and Capricorn energy. Let me see what else I wrote here. These placements can have this energy or this association with kind of parental love or parental care. And from psychology and like studying like relationship dynamics and attachment styles, so much of our personality and our issues and whatever are based off of childhood things or relationships that we have with our parents. And so the Cancer-Capricorn nodes has so much to do with the magic that comes from self-parenting. And so someone who's just really grounded in um, their own inner security can often build really beautiful things or systems in the world that have that kind of Cancerian watery magic to it as well, and which is a contrast to a lot of the things in the world that are um, like oil companies or something, or like these industries that damage the planet or are just kind of um, archaic in social conditioning, where there's not that level of sensitivity there. So for someone who discovers how to be in the world and how to be emotionally present at the same time, that can, you know, shift culture in a beautiful way. So I'm going to stop here and see if anyone has any questions.
No questions, but you are spot on. My daughter has a Cancer South node, a Capricorn South node, and yeah, thank you so much. So do you want to continue or?
Yeah, I can just share that I have Mercury-Venus conjunction square my nodes in Cancer and Capricorn, with the resolution being the Capricorn North Node. And for years of my life, and it wasn't until I found evolutionary astrology that I really could like make sense of this pattern. But I would write people letters that were like very like effusive, I think was like the word that I even like identified with it, of like I have Mercury and Venus in late Pisces and my nodes in early Capricorn, so it's an out of sign square. But I would write just these like just let something out, and then afterwards feel all this anxiety and sometimes even shame of like I can't believe I said all of that. And sometimes like getting results from my letters of like people crying and feeling like their life had been transformed because they were like almost like love letters essentially, or feeling, you know, like that person just didn't talk to me again. And just being you know, through self-discovery and like personal development stuff, kind of learning about my own boundaries and how to reveal things in time, or how to feel in my own authority when I'm communicating, so that I don't kind of let something out and then feel bad about it after and then kind of like repress it. So working with this square has been really helpful for me, of like figuring out how to um, moderate emotional exposure, which feels like something that not everyone necessarily has the need to be calculated about or to feel so intentional about. But if you have a lot of emotions and you have a history of like outbursts, then figuring out how to live in a more holistic way that prevents those outbursts from even happening has been something that I've really been working on and learning from having this nodal pattern. But yeah, I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts or questions. Does anyone here have these nodes?
Hi, Sabrina. It's Wendy.
Hi.
Hey. Wow, that was fantastic. You're so spot on with the whole thing. I don't have these nodes. There were a couple people on the Facebook Live that had them, but I have a very good friend that has the South Node in Capricorn, and oh my gosh, she does amazing things in the world, and she actually is an intuitive, a medium, and so her north node's in the ninth with the moon and Sag. So it's like a very powerful combination, but it just, everything you said described her to a T. Because anyway, of course, you know, time matures people and we grow through our patterns. And I was feeling upset about it today because we're not talking, because I basically set like a big boundary, and I think she feels really hurt, and we haven't talked for a long time now, and it's been bugging me. And so hearing everything you said today just really helped. I mean, I already let it go, but it was really good just to see the whole pattern. And of course, I have the moon in Capricorn, so I have the double signature plus Pluto in the fourth, so I can relate to a lot of it also. It's different, but
Yeah, similar
yeah,
archetypal.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christiane, would you like to ask your question?
I saw the question in the chat from Christiana about what if Saturn squares the nodes.
Yes.
And basically, like all the nodes, all the planets squaring the nodes have their own kind of impasse. And talking about the nodes themselves is kind of like what's the vacillation pattern that the thing is integrating into. So with Saturn squares the nodes, it can often be something around the planet squaring the nodes is having difficulty integrating in the person's personality or life circumstances in a way that feels balanced between both nodes. So it's hard to say, like just off the top of my head. It would help to look at the whole chart and really sit with it. But Saturn square the nodes to me usually has something to do with integrating themes around responsibility or having a public life into the chart. And so there can be a sense of difficulty with work ethic, or, you know, with the concept of work, or with social conventions, like that there just being some kind of issue or impasse with those topics. But I know that Mark Jones has a series on Astrology University about planets squaring the nodes specifically, and this series that I'm doing is about the nodes specifically, and like what kind of backdrop. Thanks, Christiana.
Sabrina, I have my moon in Cancer, and I found everything you said about the Cancer archetype just spot on. How do you consider the moon in terms of the nodes in chart readings?
So the nodes of the moon, you know, they're connected. The moon is going to be kind of like our present life rhythms. And so you can look at the nodes in relationship to the moon. Often, you know, we look at the nodes in evolutionary astrology in relationship to Pluto. But the south node would be the way that the lunar rhythms have been supported in the past, and that Pluto's intention has been manifested or worked through in the past, like the vehicle. And the north node is what, you know, you're working or aspiring toward. But if the planets, if the nodes are squared, then it's, this seesaw pattern. So I think that even just considering the moon in relationship to the nodes is feeling into, you know, the past and future, or the kind of axis that your moon is working through. So it would just add another level of depth, I suppose, to consider the moon with its nodes.
Great, thank you. Okay, any final thoughts?
This was just having me think about, again, before I had the map of astrology, to think about this in this way of having experiences where there would be some kind of temptation to have a really immature response, even though I knew it was immature, you know, and then to give into it, say the thing, send the letter, send the text message, and then feel so bad about it afterward, that the path of like learning the balance of restraint and learning more responsible ways of disclosing emotions that aren't blaming or guilting or, you know, anything that's based off of being in a victimized position and projecting power and authority onto the other person. Like to really get into a place of inner security and then practice emotional disclosure, as technical as that sounds, is like a really big kind of revolution for this placement, I think.
Well, that is great advice. Thank you so much. And would you all please unmute and thank Sabrina Monarch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina. See you next time.